The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black. Assemblywoman Black. Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
And I will give another call for Assemblywoman Black. And
Here.
Oh, thank you. And
Okay.
Assemblywoman Brown May. And finally, Chair Flores.
Present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And I apologize. I don't know that I understood. Who was the last member you just called, Madam Secretary?
Brown May. I believe she doesn't start until Monday, does she?
Yeah, that's correct, Madam
All right,
Secretary.
thank you, sir.
You kind of beat me to the surprise now.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. No, I'm joking with you. Thank you. So members, I'll start the conversation there with everybody this morning. As you all by now have heard, the County Commission down south has appointed a new member, and we're going to have the privilege of having her joining us in this committee next week after we go through the formal swearing in that's necessary up here. And so I ask that you please welcome her and that you work closely alongside of her. As you can imagine, it's very frustrating and difficult for us having come up here and knowing that we were going to do it. Somebody who took on this appointment with such short notice, I think it would be appropriate for all of us to work closely with her and try to make this as easy as possible for her. I want to remind those of you following us virtually that everybody in their respective space has a unique setup. And sometimes you'll see folk looking to the right, to the left, up, down. And it's just because some of us have more than one laptop, or we have two different screens, or we're looking down at documents and we're not looking directly at the monitor. It's not that we're not paying attention. It's just that our unique setup calls for us to be looking in multiple directions. I want to remind members to please, every single time that you're not speaking, that you keep your microphone muted to ensure that we don't get any awkward feedback. And members, please keep your cameras on. As you know, it proves to those following us virtually that we're here, we're present, and that we're doing the people's work. Members, you've seen the agenda. We have two presentations scheduled for today. But before we do that, we do have a BDR introduction that we have to do. Just wanted to give you a heads up. All we're doing is introducing the bill. There's a lot of work that happens during the interim, and there's bills that get introduced by other folk, and sometimes the committee will carry them, et cetera. So the bill for you to vote today, for it to be introduced, is only so that it can get a hearing. It doesn't mean you support it, you like it, or even that you understand the bill in its entirety. This is just for it to be introduced, it gets moved, and it will get a hearing. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to introduce BDR number 42109, which makes various changes relating to wildfires. Do I have any member making a motion?
So moved.
Madam Vice Chair has made the motion to introduce BDR number 42109. Do I have a second?
Second. Second.
And if I could have you state your name?
Jill Dickman, but someone else did as well, so.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Dickman has seconded that motion to introduce BDR number 42109. Members, any discussion? And I'm just looking through our chat to make sure we're good. Seeing no discussion, Madam Secretary, if I could please have you call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Black.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Yes.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Yes.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Yes.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Yes.
Chair Flores.
Yes. Madam Secretary, all members have voted, and we will, the motion carries. Members, I also wanted to ask, excuse me, not members, but those of you following virtually and who are going to be presenting before this committee. Although we are doing our meetings virtually, our secretaries are not always following it visually, and sometimes they're just listening to the meeting. So I ask that every time that you address the committee that you please state your name for the record. It's not as important for formality purposes, but more because you help our staff when they're trying to create the minutes for this particular meeting. So with that, we're going to have two presentations, and we'll start off in the order they appear in the agenda. Our first presentation is by the Department of Veteran Services, and we have Director Miller, please, whenever you're ready, broadcasting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and thank you for joining us this morning. It's always great to see you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair Flores, and thank you, Vice Chair Torres, and members of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs for the opportunity to present an overview of the Nevada Department of Veteran Services. For the record, my name is Kat Miller. I'm the department's director, and with me today I have Deputy Directors Amy Garland and Fred Wager, and our Executive Officer, Mr. Kurt Green, should I need some additional assistance on answering any of your questions. In my presentation, I'll be providing information about the veterans we serve, a department overview, a high-level introduction of our department bills, and end with recent accomplishments and future plans. There are about 19 million US veterans, and nationwide this population is declining and predicted to be about 13.6 million in 2037. This, of course, presumes no major worldwide conflicts. A veteran is older, on average, than a non-veteran, and almost 90% of them are male. However, the number and percentage of women veterans continue to grow. It's projected that in 2045, about 16% of veterans will be women. Veterans have a higher household income than non-veterans and compare well in other economic and educational indicators, as shown on this slide. Let me put this in presentation mode. Sorry about that. There you go. Make it a little easier to read. And now on to Nevada veterans. Almost 250,000 veterans call Nevada home. The largest cohort are Vietnam-era veterans, and 49% of veterans are age 65 or older. Other demographic data is shown on this slide. Now on to the department's vision and mission. Our mission is to ensure Nevada veterans and their families understand and can connect to the benefits and services they have earned. This slide lays out our vision, our mission, and our 7 major lines of effort. And members of the committee, you're going to see there's a lot of information on these slides that I'm just not going to be reading. I know you have a copy of it, but I'm prepared to answer questions on the end on anything I might not have covered on the slides. Next is our organizational diagram. We have 3 major divisions: the Programs and Services Division, the Health and Wellness Division, and our Administrative Support Branch. Next, I wanted to share our current strategic goals with you. Our first goal is our oldest. It's been around since 1943, and that's to reintegrate current era veterans into Nevada communities. Of course, then we were reintegrating World War II veterans, and today we're reintegrating Global War on Terror veterans. The last goal on the slide is our newest, and hopefully will be a short-term goal, and that's to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. This slide shows our various programs. As I mentioned, our first program is our oldest, 1943, the Veterans Service Officer Program, and this is where they help veterans connect to their benefits. And our 2 veteran cemeteries are mentioned here. They were established in 1990, and our first veteran skilled nursing home was constructed in Southern Nevada in 2001. A second home was constructed in Northern Nevada in 2019. In the past decade, the Nevada Department of Veteran Services has expanded operations to better reintegrate veterans and their families into our community. Our newest program is our Veterans Justice Reintegration Program, where we work in collaboration with the Department of Corrections and Veterans Courts across the state. I'm going to dive a little deeper into some of our major programs. First, our nursing homes. We offer 24-hour skilled nursing care for veterans, spouses, and Gold Star parents at 2 state veterans homes. The Southern Nevada State Veterans Home in Boulder City has 180 beds and is an award-winning 5-star facility. It was constructed in 2001. The Northern Nevada State Veterans Home in Sparks is a 96-bed facility, and as I mentioned, it opened in 2019. That home is currently at 87% occupant. Veterans in the Northern Nevada home have their own private room and share a den, living room, and kitchen with 15 other residents. In the Southern Nevada home, they are double veteran rooms. As I mentioned, we have 2 state veteran cemeteries, one in Fernley and one in Boulder City. These cemeteries honor veterans, eligible family members, and Gold Star parents with dignified burial and final resting places. Over 58,000 veterans and family members have been interred at our cemeteries. The cemeteries were built and expanded using grants awarded by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And the VA reimburses the state $807 per interment. Veteran interments are offered at no charge, but family members are charged a state interment fee of $450. And as our Gold Star parents. Our next major program is our Veterans Advocacy and Support Team, which we refer to as the VAST. The VAST assists veterans, service members, and their families access benefits and opportunities. Veteran service officers respond to over 1,000 requests for assistance a month, and they generate about $17 million each in benefits annually on behalf of veterans. Our VAST manages the Nevada Veterans Advocate Program with over 700 volunteers who help share benefit information within their community. This is an increase in veterans advocates of 200 since the last report to this committee. Now to our outreach programs. The Community Outreach Program helps connect veterans and community supporters. This slide shows the many community outreach programs that we have and include employer education programs, justice reintegration, homelessness, and suicide prevention. It also includes our rural outreach programs under Rover and our Women Veterans Program. And I wanted to take just a second to show you our revenue sources last fiscal year, and the next slide will show what our projected revenue sources are for the next biennium. Revenue to operate our programs comes from many sources, but 75% of our revenue last fiscal year came from federal funds, with 9% from general funds and 4% from donations. The percentage from donations has historically been around 7%. The reason for the reduction is as we opened the Northern Nevada home, we are seeing more federal revenue come in. So we're not receiving less donations, but as a percentage of the pie, the percentage of donations comes in. Now this slide shows our 21-23 revenue projections in greater detail. Projected revenue is similar to our 2020 actuals, with a slight increase in federal revenues associated with being full census at our Northern Nevada State Veterans Home. And I'm going to jump to session activities. In our budget bill, in the NDDS portion of the governor's budget bill, are costs associated with operating 2 veterans cemeteries, 2 veterans homes, 2 headquarters offices, and 8 veteran service officer locations, funds for essential equipment replacement, which include, and 1 flooring maintenance project, and we also have 4 capital improvement projects. I wanted to call out one of these on there, and that is the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home Renovation Planning Project. I mentioned earlier our Southern Nevada home has double rooms. We really, for the last 3 years, we've been working to try to develop plans to put that to single rooms. A resident of a double room in a nursing home is 3.7 times more likely to contract a respiratory disease than one in a single room. And I think that would be self-evident why. And so by moving to single rooms, not only does it improve the quality of life for our residents, but it protects them better. On the other side, you see our non-budgetary bills. AB 22 would establish a state of Nevada transition assistance program for veterans and their families. There's already a federal transition assistance program, but it doesn't cover the main state benefits. And when a veteran gets out, the things that they're asking for, what they need help with, is employment, home, healthcare, and to get their kids in school. And these are all things that are state and county-led services. The next is AB 76, which would authorize the Nevada Department of Veterans Service to establish and operate programs to provide adult day health care. Now, this bill does not ask for permission to build a home, to start one immediately, but it would just give us the authority to establish one, and that way we can start applying for grants. 3 years ago, the VA added a new per diem category, and it allowed reimbursement for veterans and adult day health care. Why that's important, especially in Southern Nevada, you have many families that have both the adults working, and if they have a family member, a veteran who might have a memory care issue, it's very difficult and very dangerous to leave that person at home. So if there was an opportunity to leave mom or dad who's a veteran at home in the evening, so they could be with the family, but let them go somewhere safe during the day, that's what this program would give us. And again, we're not seeking funding this year or anything. It's just the authority to establish the program so I can start going after grants to see if we can build something like this in the future. And the last is AB 77, which would revise the duties of the director to capture missions we're already doing, and to change the terms of the members of 4 veterans advisory commissions and committees to standardize the number of years for which they're appointed. Okay, and I'm going to take just a couple slides to mention some of our accomplishments, because as I look back over the last 2 years, it just amazes me that we were able to get as much done as possible under the current circumstances. I'm not going to read all of these, but I want to highlight a couple of them. We expanded Nevada veteran suicide programs, adding the Governor's Challenge to prevent veteran suicide and adding Winnemucca and Elko's challenges to the ones, Mayor's challenges we already have in the Truckee Meadows area and in Las Vegas. We published the first State of Nevada Veterans Caregiver and Survivor Guide, and as mentioned, we established a new Justice Reintegration Program. And we're working with partners to focus on the needs of incarcerated veterans and those participating in veterans courts. On this slide, I want to highlight the dozens of virtual memorial and education events conducted during the pandemic. Include our new In the Know series, which helps veterans and their families connect to earn benefits. One of them I'd like to highlight is the discharge upgrade seminar we had. That helps veterans understand that if they had less than an honorable discharge, how they would go about getting that upgraded so they can tap into those veterans benefits. And then at both homes, we implemented telehealth appointments and family connection video calls and created the Family Connection Task Force to combat the isolation many older veterans may be experiencing during the coronavirus pandemic. And this task force was comprised of people from across the state, and it wasn't just for our nursing homes. It was aimed at looking at solutions to combat isolation for veterans in any nursing home and any assisted living across the state. And then the last accomplishment slide, I'd like to point out, we created a video that has gone nationwide, designed to reduce veteran suicide. And with the help of volunteers, we scanned over 25,000 of 80,000 archived military discharge documents into our veterans information system. And this will help us locate and support Nevada veterans and their families. We also shared our nationally recognized Bravo Zulu Dementia Training Program for caregivers of veterans with the Sanford Center for Aging, who implemented the program through a statewide grant. And what's next? Over the horizon. In the Programs and Services Division, I want to highlight 4 things. I mentioned AB 22, the State Transition Assistance Program. We're already working on an online version of that and working with partners to see how that might implement it. And we're halfway through developing our GPS-enabled system to help families locate their loved ones at the burial locations. The VA has a system called BOSS at our cemeteries, but it seems like it's down about half of the time. And if you are coming from out of town and you don't know where your loved one is buried, you want to visit grandpa or grandma, it would be awfully nice if you could just pull out your cell phone, type in their name, and be directed to walk exactly where you need to go to. And we're working with our congressional delegation in the VA to establish a Veterans Rural Burial Ground in Elko. This was approved in 2013, but there's been a number of roadblocks. And at this point, it's taking a land bill. And I think they're well on the way. COVID slowed us down a little bit. But hopefully they'll get that land bill passed and get everything we need to do and get a rural burial ground. Now, a burial ground is different than a veteran's cemetery. This is where the VA actually contracts out to have another local cemetery run it. It's held to the same standards and it's separated as would be a veterans burial area, but it's not run by the state and it doesn't require any. Although we will be helping once established inspection for technical assistance. And the last thing is I'm really proud of, we continue to grow our Nevada Veteran Advocate Force from 700 to 1,000. We want to continue to grow it from 700 to 1,000. These veterans advocates are out in their community. They're well trained. They take an online course with 20 modules, and they're able then to help in their community navigate veterans to services and family members that they need. And the healthcare services, we have a number of exciting plans to include the plan for renovating the Southern Nevada Veterans Home, converting it to a single bed facility, creating a certified nursing assistant training program at the Southern Nevada Home so we can grow our own, expanding programs to educate community care providers regarding the mental and medical health needs of veterans, and of course their benefits, and to connect family members and caregivers to needed federal, state, and local resources. And the last slide to talk about our over-the-horizon plans are our administrative services branch. We want to improve our veterans information system and have recently procured a source code that will dramatically improve our data collection and complete the gravesite location program I mentioned earlier. We just got our new kiosk that is a companion piece to the Battleborn Memorial in Carson City. The kiosk we would populate with information about Nevada's fallen heroes. And of course, we want to increase the number of grants we successfully apply for. And Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Torres, and members of the committee, this concludes my briefing, and I stand ready to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for your presentation. And I did just want to take this point of privilege and say thank you Mr. Fred Wagger, who during the interim would consistently provide updates to a whole host of us and would reach out and just work with us very well. So I wanted to put that on the record, how grateful I am to all the information he's been providing for the last year, especially with how difficult it's been for our veterans. And thank you for all the work you do. We appreciate you being here. There's a whole host of members that want to ask a bunch of questions. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Assemblywoman Black, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo what the chairman said. Since I was up in District 19, Mr. Wagger has very generously given up his time to update me about what's going on at the Veterans Home in Boulder City. And I just want to say how proud I am of how you guys have handled the outbreak, pandemic, and keeping residents safe, and just say what a great job you guys have done, and acknowledge you for all the fine work that you do, and say thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And Cat Miller, for the record, when the pandemic started, Deputy Director Amy Garland's in charge of the 2 veterans homes, and we knew we were going to have to divide and conquer. And so Fred is our state emergency operations center lead, and I think he has done a wonderful job, and I'm very grateful to have both of our deputies. They did great work. And I'm happy to report that currently we have no residents positive for COVID in our home. We do have 2 staff members, but they are asymptomatic for those members who do not receive calls. And what we've been doing is calling key leads in the legislature and those that are in the districts where our homes are. So if we didn't call you, it's not that we didn't think you had a need to know. It just, those calls take about 20 minutes for some of them for Fred to get through. And we wanted to make sure that the key, those on key committees and those that are in the districts knew what was going on in our veterans home. And thank you for the comment.
Next, if we could have Assemblyman Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Miller, thank you so much for being here with us this morning, and thank you to you and everyone in your department for all you're doing to support those who have served our country. I had a question regarding Assembly Bill 22, which you touched on. You noted that it would establish the state of Nevada Transition Assistance Program for veterans. My recollection is that a few years ago, we had in place something called the Green Zone Initiative. And my understanding is the core function of that initiative was to sort of help returning servicemen and women transition back into civilian life with a particular emphasis on finding employment and developing the skills to gain employment. My understanding also is that that initiative is also no longer in place. And what I'm wondering is, and maybe it's a multi-part question, but would Assembly Bill 22, is the aim of that essentially to create a program that would replace or take on the responsibilities of the Green Zone Initiative? Are some of those responsibilities already delegated to other programs within the department? And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to why that Green Zone Initiative ended up being sort of disbanded or folded. What some of the inefficiencies may have been, and what the goal is to sort of, through either this new bill or existing programs, improve on whatever inefficiencies there might have been. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Cat Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblyman. First, the Green Zone Initiative was very successful, and it wasn't disbanded. It was really renamed. So the Green Zone refers to an area in Iraq where services were marshaled and aligned, and that's what the then director, Caleb Cage, wanted to do. He wanted to change the paradigm. So we brought together local, county, state, nonprofits. We brought together people in a way that could really address the needs of veterans, identify them, and solve problems. And unfortunately, a lot of people thought the Green Zone referred to, we were selling solar panels, or, it didn't really, the title of it caused a little confusion. But the Green Zone Initiative was really the heavy lift, in the military, I'm not Navy, I'm Army, but the Navy would say turning the battleship. The Green Zone Initiative turned the battleship for the department and what our mission was. But it in itself was not a program other than creating veterans community councils, creating the Interagency Council on Veterans Affairs, and creating an architecture and a structure to bring problems from the grassroots level to the governor and the legislature so we could address them and solve them. And those systems are still in place. But we didn't need that anymore. So now, I mean, we didn't need to turn a battleship. Battleship's been turned. And the website was called the Green Zone Network. We changed that to Nevada VetNet, because when people are Googling or whatever their web browser is to look for services, they don't know to put in Green Zone, but they know to put in Nevada Veteran. And what happens is we increase the number of hits dramatically on our website. We get hits from all over the world. In fact, we had a nationally recognized, if you go to our website, Nevada Department of Veteran Services, there's a button that says Ask a VSO. And people all over the world, we had one from Australia, I can't even remember all of them, Fred could say. And people are hitting that, and we're able to get them immediate response back. So it's been, the name has been retooled. And so now let's get to AB 22. AB 22 formalizes the way we address information needs of departing service members and gets them before they're departed. So what happens is we will be operating outside in Nellis, Creech, and Fallon. We're working with commanders. And so before they get out, they're already getting something called TAP, a federal TAP that talks about the VA benefits. But this would be a companion piece to say, oh, by the way, and you want to get a job in Nevada, you want to get a house in Nevada, you want to put your kids in school in Nevada, you need health insurance in Nevada. None of that's in the federal TAP. And so this would create that companion piece. Does that answer your question, sir?
It does. Thank you very much. I really, really do appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I did have one other question. I'm happy to circle back if you like, if others would like to jump in.
Yeah, you can go ahead and ask the next follow-up.
Okay, this is slightly different direction here. Looking at the information you provided, and it looks like roughly 3/4 of the department's funding comes from federal funds. I'm just wondering if you could touch on what the trend might be, how that percentage compares to, say, 10 years ago. I'm just wondering whether the federal government is increasingly picking up a larger portion of that, or if it's going the other direction. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Kat Miller for the record. When we opened our first cemetery in 1990, we started getting that reimbursement, and that added to the federal funding. And then when we opened our nursing homes, almost all of the funds to operate the nursing homes, it was like 18 million 2 years ago. I'd have to look at it right now. But the bulk of that money for federal funds is reimbursements that are coming to operate our nursing homes. We did not reach full census yet in the Northern Nevada home because the pandemic hit us and we had to keep one wing of 8 open for an isolation area. But once we get up to full census, we'll have a slight increase. And I think our balance will be about the same. Our goal is not to be a heavy draw on general funds. But let's say 10 years, 20 years from now, somebody decided to open an adult day healthcare. That would be additional federal funding. So that piece of the federal fund pie would get larger. So the only thing I could see that would make a dramatic increase in federal funds would be an opening of another facility that would draw federal funds. And if I might, Mr. Chair, could I please open that to Deputy Director Amy Garland, because she's my budget brain?
Please do.
Amy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, actually, you presented it beautifully, but the most of the federal funds is from our state veterans homes reimbursement. So I'll give you some examples that might help you understand what that federal money is. It's Medicare and Medicaid. The VA also gives us a per diem plus a reimbursement for those that are 70 to 100% service connected. So that's a big majority for both homes.
Assemblyman, did that answer that question?
Thank you very much.
Next, if we could have Assemblywoman Dickman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank Director Colonel Miller for the great presentation. but more importantly, for all the amazing work you do to support our veterans. And I'm just thrilled to be able to work with you again. Thank you so much.
Pat Miller for the record. Thank you very much, Assemblywoman. And I have the best job in the state. You shouldn't even be paying me. But please don't mention that to the Assembly Ways and Means Committee.
Director, you do know that these meetings are recorded. Next, if we could have Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Assemblywoman Claire Thomas, and I would like to express my thanks to Director Miller. Thank you for your service, and thank you for this presentation. I just have a couple of questions. You have, on your slides, have expressed the accomplishments in regards to the veteran suicide programs on page 16 and page 18. I'm showing that you have, one of your accomplishments is a video designed to reduce veteran suicide. And I would want you to, if you could expand or explain the expanded Nevada veteran suicide programs with the addition of the governor's to end veteran suicide. Before I really go into one of my questions that I have, if you can give me an explanation of that, please.
Pat Miller for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Thank you for that great question. And I want to start with saying Nevada is the only state in the union who showed a reduction in veteran suicide for the last 2 years in a row. And it's small, but it's going the right direction. And a lot of that, if we take a look at the last couple of years in the legislature, some of the bills that were passed, training for medical providers on suicide prevention, training to police officers and first responders on what to do. But the veterans programs that we're talking about in this slide were created by SAMHSA, which is the mental health at the national level. And I'm going to ask Amy to tell you what SAMHSA says, or Fred, in a minute. But the VA and SAMHSA, which falls under the Department of Health and Human Services, created this program and then first offered it to different states that were having challenges with veteran suicide. And we received the first program in Las Vegas several years ago. And that was a mayor's challenge. And so our department was just part of the mayor's team under Mayor Goodman. And they had some really great results. And so we asked the VA if they would, and SAMHSA, if they would expand the program to the Truckee Meadows area, to Reno and Sparks, and they did. And then we asked if they would give us a governor's challenge. A governor's challenge is more policy associated. You bring on the mayor's challenges, which bring together providers at the local level to make sure that there's no gaps in services, and you identify the needs and develop new programs and do that actual connecting the person that has the need with the resource. But at the governor's level, it's about developing policy and determining what we need to do as a state. And so that was, we got that in 2019, very excited about the work being done. There's some things that not only the mayor's challenges, but the governor's challenges, SAMHSA has taken to other states because they've really been impressive initiatives. And then about 7 months ago, we asked to be expanded so we could get the mayor's challenges in Winnemucca and Elko, and those are just standing up. And again, the challenges, what they're about is bringing all the right people together in a room and almost case management at the, at the mayor's challenge, and figuring out what we need to do better. So the right hand is talking to the left. I guess hands can't talk to each other, but it's really created a synchronization across our state. And I think that combined with some of the legislation that's passed has started to make a difference. We have been very worried this last year because, studies will show that isolation leads to depression, and depression can lead to taking your life. And so keeping people connected during the pandemic has been a major effort on the part of mayor's challenges and the governor's challenge. And Assemblywoman, if I could use a lifeline really quick and just see if I've left anything out and turn it over, Mr. Chair, if you've no problem, to Deputy Director Fred Wagger, because the suicide prevention program falls under him. Fred, anything to add?
I just wanted to let everybody know that SAMHSA is SAMHSA, and it stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you. And I did also want to mention Nevada has an Office of Suicide Prevention, and you better believe we are hand in gloved. Misty Von Allen, Richard Egan down in Southern Nevada. We don't do anything without our partners in DHHS when it comes to the area of dealing with the tragedy of suicide. Madam Assemblywoman, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And if I may, Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Please follow up.
Thank you. Director Miller, just wanted to know if we have anywhere in the state of Nevada a behavioral health facility that addresses specifically mental health issues of our veterans. And I guess the caveat would be specifically suicide prevention, anywhere in the state.
This is Kat Miller for the record. Assemblywoman, thank you for the question. And yes, we do. Our VA hospitals in Reno and Las Vegas have wonderful mental health activities. Any veteran, regardless of their eligibility in other ways or what their character of discharge is, the VA hospitals and the clinic in Elko, which falls under the Salt Lake VA, offer those services for veterans who are at risk for suicide. It's not a standalone facility, but it is a separate and segregated area. And they also contract out with the other facilities where they can go. On top of that, they have something called the Veterans Resource Center that falls under the VA. And it is specifically for combat veterans who are experiencing issues associated with the trauma of war. And there is one down in Las Vegas and there is one in Reno. Fred, is there anything to add to that?
Not specifically on that, but if you want to touch on the Prevents program for the that the VA has developed, and our Kim Donahue is our program manager for that.
And this is Kat Miller for the record. Fred, if you could just state your title and if you would go ahead and provide that information, that would be awesome.
I apologize. Fred Wager for the record. So the VA developed what's called Prevents program. It is a program that was started under the previous administration, but has continued, and it provides additional mental health and suicide prevention. Kim Donahue is our program manager for suicide prevention for Nevada Department of Veterans Services, and she has actually been named an ambassador for the state of Nevada for the Prevents program, and so we're very proud of her, but she is just an amazing person and works very hard. She works on the lead for our agency for the mayor's challenges and for the governor's challenge, and gets a lot of different people involved. So we do have the mayor's challenge. We've mentioned Winnemucca and Elko, but it actually started in Las Vegas and then Truckee Meadows with Reno and Sparks. And so it's expanded. A lot of programs, a lot of, as Director Miller mentioned, a lot of different agencies involved with this. And we'd encourage you to get involved with the mayor's challenges in your communities if you're able to. Director Miller.
Kat Miller for the record. Assemblywoman, does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for your service.
And next we have Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Miller. First, I do have to say that your bookshelf is like my goal at some point in my life. So it's a great bookshelf. But now back on topic. I actually have two questions for you. The first has to do with outreach. How do our newly retired armed service members find out about these amazing services? And also, how do people, when they move into our state, find out about all these services? And then I can ask the second question that's not at all related afterwards or at the same time, whatever you prefer, Director Miller.
I'm ready to write the question down now, ma'am.
Okay. And then the second question has to do with the staffing at the hospitals in particular. I am similar to Assemblymember Black, where the hospital, the home, excuse me, not hospital, is actually in my district in Assembly District 30. So I'm just interested, is the staffing at these locations, is this done by state employees? Is it done by federal employees, or is it a private entity that runs these locations?
Cap Miller, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Assemblywoman. Let me start with the staffing at the nursing homes. The Southern Nevada State Veterans Home are state employees. The Northern Nevada State Veterans Home is a contracted management company called Avalon. That may seem a little strange, but I asked the legislature session before, taking a look at the fact it took 10 years to get into the black for the Southern Nevada home. And, you know, we have the experience of one home having a management company who has an incredible track record and the business practices to get us up and running. We estimated it'd take 2 or 3 years to become general fund independent. Probably take 3 to 4 years right now because I'm a year behind. Thank you, COVID. But we're well on the track to achieving that. Sometime in the future, probably a future legislature will need to take a look at these two systems and see which one works best. But I think it'll be another couple of years before I'll have all the data, or our department will have the data to make a recommendation on systems. But both are working very, very well. As far as newly service members that are getting out, we receive from Department of Defense a copy of discharge documents of everyone that says they're moving to Nevada, and we send a welcome letter to all of them as soon as we get their data. That welcome letter includes information about state of Nevada services, how to contact a veteran service officer to help them more specifically. It has information from Dieter on jobs. It has information from business and industry on homes, and it has industry on health insurance. So we're really proud of that welcome home letter. The TAP program, if instituted, would not only be for service members in Creech, Nellis, and Fallon, but it would also be open to veterans that are coming back into the state. And so they could attend one of these sessions to learn about it, because you might have told Department of Defense you were getting out and going to North Carolina, and a year later decide to move to Nevada for a job, and you need this information. That is the biggest problem we have. How do we let veterans know we exist? And we spend a lot of time and effort trying to do that. We're much better than we were before, but that's why that Veterans Information System is so important. We're getting data from the DMV, on people who have registered and say that they're a veteran. We're getting data from Department of Health and Human Services. And so we're working with as many partners as possible to locate veterans. But sometimes we're going to have to do things like public service announcements. We're working on one right now. There is Agent Orange for Vietnam veterans. There were 8 presumptive conditions. So if you had any 8 of these diseases and you were in Vietnam, you didn't have to prove it was as a result of your military service. You could immediately not only get medical care, but get a check, a compensation in terms of financial aid, regardless of your income level. They just added 3 new conditions to Agent Orange. How do I let all these veterans who served in Vietnam know that if they have bladder cancer, that you can get care from the VA? You can get a check. If you have Parkinson's-like condition, if you have, I think it's hyperthyroidism is the third one. But how do I let everybody know? And so that consumes a lot of our time. We're not 100%, but we're going to figure it out. But unless they chip every veteran when they get out of the service, that's going to continue to be a problem. And I'm not recommending that course of action. And I think those answer those questions, Madam.
Thank you. And I would agree that I don't think doing the chip is a good idea. So I appreciate your answer. I'm assuming that the majority of information is sent through physical mail, not email, which could be one reason why it's so difficult sometimes to get our homeless veterans the help that they need.
Kat Miller, for the record, Assemblywoman, yeah, the Department of Defense they were putting down the emails of the veterans where they were currently, not where they were going to. So it wasn't very helpful to us. So we do a hard copy mail. We also have an app that we have on phones that's getting pretty good coverage to send out to folks. But again, right now, if you put in your browser Nevada veteran, The way we have things going, people can find us fairly easily, and we have a great newsletter. But if anybody has any suggestions on better ways for us to outreach to veterans to let them know about their benefits and services, we are always open to that.
Thank you.
And the next we have Assemblyman Ellison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it was good seeing you again, Kat. And I look forward to, I hope you're going to Carlin for the presentations they're going to have next week. And that's for the Fire Science Academy where they're going to open the school.
Kat Miller for the record. Sir, I wish I could. I'm not going to be able to get to Carlin, and I love Carlin, but unfortunately I have some competing things.
Yeah, my daughter's going to go. One of the questions I've got is Pete Goguchi and I both sat on the Veteran Cemetery Board, and they were one shy of, filling one of the seats. I put a recommendation that Gil Hernandez fill that seat, and I haven't heard any more back. Could you check on that for me? It's kind of hard to get a hold of these guys sometimes.
Kat Miller for the record. I will, sir, and we'll get you an answer back as soon as possible on the status of that.
Okay, and I thank you, and I thank you for your service. It's always great to see you, and hope to God that we ever get the floor open where you can come back and sit with me.
Kat Miller for the record. Looking forward to that, sir.
Thank you.
Members, I don't know if we have any additional questions, and I apologize if I accidentally skip somebody. I want to make sure that before we close out the presentation, everybody can get their questions answered. I don't believe we have any additional questions. Director, thank you again for the presentation, and I want to thank all of you for all the work you do. And obviously, it's incredibly important you take care of folk who have done everything for this country. So it's an honor to have you before this committee. Members, I encourage you to reach out to them, use them as a resource for yourself. If there's ever anything you need related to veteran services, if they don't know the answer, they'll direct you to the right person. I know that because I've had so many constituents reach out, and I know Mr. Wagger was very helpful in getting some help for some folks. So make sure you keep their information and reach out to them. Thank you for the presentation again. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the presentation from the Department of Veteran Services. And next, we're going to open up the presentation from the Nevada Equal Rights Commission. Ms. Jenkins, how are you?
Good morning, Chair Flores. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we do.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
And so I have with me my Chief Compliance Investigator and Outreach Specialist, Leila Vizcarra. She's going to be running the slides. Also with me, I have DETR's Deputy Director, Jenny Castleman, and NERC's Legal Counsel, Sophia Long. And so before I get started, Jenny, would you like to say anything to the committee? Okay, well, we'll circle back. She may not be live. So I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak to you all, Chair Flores, Vice Chair Torres, and members of the committee. I'm very passionate about NERC. For the record, my name is Kara Jenkins, and I've been the administrator at NERC for quite some time now. The goal is to kind of explain what we do, how we do it, and if you have any questions at the end, we'll be happy to entertain any questions. So Leila, we'll go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, so NERC is housed, and I really don't read off slides, so they're going to be short bullet points, getting to the point, and then I'm going to kind of get into a conversation mode. So NERC is housed within the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. You may have heard of them, especially last year and moving forward. but we are within that department. But we're essentially a commission, similar to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So we have an agency component, which includes my team, myself, and then we have 5 appointed governor appointee commissioners that are going to foster the goodwill of equal rights. They're supposed to be reflective of the state of Nevada in terms of diversity, and also have a passion for essentially spreading the gospel of equal rights in the state. So we are an agency within DETR, but we are set up like a commission similar to the EEOC, who we do partner with, and I'll get into that as well. And so you'll see the next bullet, we oversee the state's Equal Employment Opportunity Program. We also have jurisdiction not only in employment discrimination allegations and settling those, but also with public accommodation, discrimination complaints, and housing complaints. And also talk about our relationship with the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, which we are striving to get substantially equivalent in law so we can partner with HUD. We investigate complaints of discrimination. We try to settle them. We are essentially the administrative entity that before you go to court, before you sue on a federal claim of employment discrimination, or if you go to state court on a housing discrimination case, or federal court if you work it through HUD, or a public accommodation or access or equal enjoyment state-only litigation complaint, you have to come to us. It's strongly recommended. In fact, most judges will ask attorneys representing their clients, did you go through NERC first? And so we prep cases for litigation with the goal of hoping to settle for all Nevadans. We'll go to the next slide, Leela. So before I talk about kind of how we take in complaints and how we settle them and give everybody due process, not only the complainant or I'll say charging party, but also protecting the rights and giving education and training and toolkits to employers so they can avoid discrimination complaints or charges. I want to go over some federal employment discrimination laws that you all are aware of, that I loved learning in law school, and I'm going to review them briefly today because they're very relevant. Spoiler alert, Nevada, I'm proud to say we mirror all these federal protections. And I'm so sorry that if you cannot see the font, I will speak it out and you have copies, but let's start with the first bullet, and we talk about the grand poobah of federal equal rights protections that I'm so proud of, that is unlike and unmatched in any other country. We have Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So in 1964, we saw a strong push for civil rights legislation to protect certain key categories of folk, okay, in employment. And so those big 5 categories that were getting differential treatment under the law in terms of employment were folks categorized based on race, color, religion, national origin, and sex. So when we talk about race, and this is a training that Leela and I give to most employers, so you're getting a sneak preview of it. I won't go into detail, but when we talk about race, interestingly enough, the federal government only acknowledges 5 races, which is kind of interesting because, you know, America is a huge melting pot and we all have ancestry from somewhere or another, but there's 5. And so when we look at charges of discrimination or allegations of discrimination, we have the complainants or charging parties check off if it's race discrimination. Was it because you felt like you were discriminated based on being Black? I'll use that as an example, as I am an African-American woman. White, Alaskan Native, Pacific Islander. So those are the protected categories that we have on our complaint forms that comprise of race discrimination. We also talk about color discrimination. That's literally the color of your skin. So when you face discrimination in employment based on color, not necessarily race, because you can be within the same racial group of a particular race, you can be the same race of someone, but have different color. So it's literally the color of your skin. That's how we explain it. So there's color discrimination. You can share the same race and still be discriminated against based on the color of your skin. We also look at complaints of discrimination based on religion. That's your belief in God or your belief not in God. So atheism is covered under this protection too. We also have national origin, which is, now that's ancestry. And so when you talk about being a Hispanic American or Hispanic, that can mean your race could be African, you can be Afro-Latino, Latina, You can be European, white, Hispanic, or you can be Central America. So it just depends. So sometimes folks will put that their race is Hispanic, but really it's your national origin or ancestry. And so that was what was covered under the Civil Rights Act of 64, where you're from. Sex. Now, that now includes, or the courts have interpreted to be inclusive of sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, and sex harassment. But in 1964, when we were looking at sex discrimination, we were really looking at, were you denied an employment opportunity because you were female, because you were male, and you weren't able to get paternity leave to take care of your kids. So that's what we're talking about. Those are the big 5 protected categories under the law in 1964 under Title VII. And we mirror that here in Nevada. In 1967, Lyndon Johnson also pushed for age discrimination in employment, and that's called ADEA. That's that second bullet. And so this protects workers who are 40 and over. I recently joined this category. I've been in it lovingly for 2 years now. Leela just joined that protected category. And between Leela and I, we check off a whole lot of boxes here at NERC. So if you are 40 and over, you have protections under the law. And what that might look like is perhaps say you are being pushed out of your job for younger workers who will work for less pay. That actually happened in my family. A parent with a lot of experience found herself being pushed out of her profession, and it was conditioned on her going back to get her degree. It was pretext though. So you might see that as an example as age discrimination, and the thought that we can get rid of the older workers, bring in younger workers, and pay them less. Or that could be harassment based on age. If someone is constantly saying, hey pops, hey old guy, hey old girl, or are you sure you know how to work that scanner? Any kind of comments that dig at your age. Sometimes we get folks that complain about being too young and they want to know if they're protected under ADEA. No, it's for 40 and over. Okay, and so in 1990, so for about almost 30 years, you didn't see any more federal legislation to protect workers until you have this huge piece of legislation that's monumental, super important, and that's the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. You had George Bush Sr. basically sign this law and protect a whole vulnerable community of workers that before 1990 were facing workplace discrimination because of their disability. And as we know, the ADA protects folks with a disability, and a disability is legally defined. This is the first time you see a legal definition for disability. And that definition is that a disability is one that substantially limits a life activity. It's anything that could substantially limit a life activity. Sitting, standing, breathing, sexual activity, eating, walking, any kind of assistance that will require some kind of accommodation. And that is the key word when we talk about the ADA, an accommodation. So how that plays out in your work life. So you have your home life, your personal life, and you have your work life. Well, you take yourself wherever you go. And so you take yourself, you and all your stuff to work. And so if you can get the job done, the ADA says that so long as it does not pose an unreasonable burden on the employer to accommodate your disability, they should do it. And when we look at like undue burdens and stuff, we look at when we get complaints from NERC, were they able to give this person additional breaks? Does that cost the employer that much? Not really. A chair, an ergonomical chair, is that too expensive? Or if we have, say, we've had folks with epilepsy say that, bright lights trigger seizures, changing out a light bulb or removing glass from the workplace kitchen. So if a seizure does happen, plates or cups or things that could break, that could cause a hazard to a person experiencing a seizure, can we remove that and just have plastic utensils? That's fine. These are not undue burdens that we've seen, not in the Ninth Circuit or not at NERC. So the ADA was great, but it was a little bit short-sighted in 1990. Not that it was bad legislation, it just didn't include a lot of other disabilities that we recognize today. So we have the 2008 Amendments Act to the ADA, which was signed by George W. And so with it, we see more coverage for folks with disabilities. We're now covering mental health conditions, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, blood disorders, hepatitis, HIV, AIDS, conditions that can really affect you, that it's not really that you need a ramp built but it still is a life-limiting activity that you need an accommodation for. Cancer is included. And so the ADA is now, it's now formally called the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act. And that includes the 1990 legislation and the 2008 amendments that basically gives you coverage for any kind of condition you can think of. Now, I'm going to just digress really quick. I'm sorry. NERC just did a training to employers, and we opened it up and we trained at no cost about the ADA and how that is related to COVID. And so we'll also be doing trainings on the vaccine. We're going to partner with the EEOC on that. But when you talk about a disability or anything that substantially limits a life activity, it does bleed in with some of these pre-existing conditions that we've acknowledged that the CDC has advised that could expose you to a more troublesome COVID episode. So, COVID-19 has definitely really hurt Americans and Nevadans, and more than that, and we're just hoping to get through it. But if you do have pre-existing conditions that are also covered under the ADA, you have a good cause for getting a reasonable accommodation to remote work. And so we found that a lot of employers needed guidance on that. What was allowable? Do they have to pay for the equipment for their remote workers? Do folks who have pre-existing conditions that are distinct from COVID, we still service them? So we have a whole training on that we did. It was really successful, and we'll keep it going with the vaccine information. But I digress. That is the ADA. And then in 2008, we have GINA, and that is the second to last bullet. If you squint really hard, that's the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And GINA is kind of like the cousin to the ADA. We don't really take a lot of GINA cases, but essentially GINA is genetic information. You cannot have your genetic information used against you in the workplace. And what is that? So I remember when I first took this position many moons ago, I asked Leila, I said, explain GINA to me in a way that's easy that I can train on. And she said, okay, look at it like this. Say you have cancer, or you have a disposition for getting cancer, or it's in your family, and somehow your employer knows of that. Say you had cancer at work and you went into remission, you're back to work, and there's now a promotional opportunity for you. You're the most qualified for that promotional opportunity. Howsoever, everybody knows that you were out because you were getting your cancer treatments. And your employer is a little worried, not about your ability to do the job, but your health, and that maybe you'll get cancer again, it'll come back. And so you get passed over because of your predisposition to cancer. Well, that's discrimination based on your genetic information. That's GINA. We rarely see that. We would probably write that up under an ADA unless we got more evidence that it was genetic information. Again, super hard to prove, but it's a lot more easier to get an employer dinged for violating the ADA by not giving a reasonable accommodation to someone who needs it. Okay, and then the last bullet down there is the Equal Pay Act. And so that's federal legislation that is amazing. And, we're really happy that now Nevada mirrors that to an extent. Equal Pay Act is essentially equal pay for the same work as it relates to women employees. It is specific to sex in that if you are a woman and you do the same work and have the same credentials as your male counterpart, you should be paid the same. Okay, Leila, we'll go to the next slide. And good news, you made it through. That was all the federal laws that protect workers. And this slide just explains that NRS 613 and NRS 233 mirrors federal law. So we are in simpatico with federal legislation. So that's great. We actually have more. So Leila, can you go to the next slide? Okay. So, and I'll get to the more in a minute. When I talk about more, I'm talking about criminal background for certain employers and certain additional protections for pregnant workers in Nevada. I'll get to that. But of all the, are we there? Okay. Of all the federal protected categories and state laws, this is it. This is the list. This is everything that's protected. We have race, color, national origin, religion, sex, which includes pregnancy, sexual harassment, disability, age, your genetic information, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression of that gender identity, and criminal background. So this slide is kind of key. This will just be your go-to. Just when you think about the Equal Rights Commission and all the protected categories we protect, just know that we're in partnership with federal law, we're in alignment with them, and that these are the protected categories. Okay, Leila, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so now that I've kind of talked about what the law says and that we mirror federal law, I want to talk about NERC and kind of how we operate. So in order for us to have jurisdiction over an employer in an employment discrimination case, you must be an employer with 15 or more employees. If you have less, then you can discriminate all you want, but we don't have jurisdiction. We just don't. So it's 15 or more. Employment or temporary agencies are covered. So even if you are a temp agency and you basically get someone ready for an actual position and temp them out, and that individual experiences discrimination on the job, you will be named as well. Labor organizations and unions are covered as well. Okay, Leila, go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay, and so in terms of the individual's rights or the Nevadan, you cannot sue over this for over 2 years, not even a year. You have had to experience, in your mind, alleged discrimination within 300 days of filing with NERC. That goes with the EEOC. That is law. That is the statute of limitations. You have 300 days, close to a year, to file a complaint with the Nevada Equal Rights Commission or the EEOC. Let me just kind of pivot for a minute and talk about our relationship with EEOC and filings. So because we are partners with the EEOC, we have a work share agreement, which means whoever takes the case first, owns the case, tries to settle the case, investigates the case, and then we report to the EEOC on how we did. They do what's called a substantial weight review to make sure that, we've crossed every T, dotted every I. Also that we don't get multiple filings. So someone files with us 1 week, then they go to the EEOC. No, we work in partnership with them to make sure that whoever takes the case first handles it. Also, we will sometimes transfer cases over to the EEOC if there could be any thoughts or appearances of conflict. We are so screened off with our confidentiality that Dieter doesn't even know the complaints or charges or the names of the complainants or respondents that we have. And Sophia's awesome with that. She's legal counsel over at the AG's office. And so we kind of run very confidentially with our relationship with the EEOC on these charges. And Nevada employers appreciate that, because until we actually find probable cause or that there was some elements of discrimination that we need to settle out, they would like to keep it private. Okay, so back to the slides. The business has to be located or licensed in Nevada. It can't be Tahoe, California. It's got to be in Nevada. So we cannot take in complaints for California. That would be the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, where my buddy Kevin runs it. So it's got to be within the state. Okay, you also have to have an employer-employee relationship in order to file with us. So again, last date of harm within 300 days. You can't be 2 years into this and decide you want to file. 300 days. It has to be a business located in Nevada or licensed in Nevada that you want to complain about or have us look into the matter. And there has to be an employer-employee relationship. You have to be on the payroll. Now, sometimes we get interesting situations where people are designated independent contractors. And sometimes we will get position statements back from the employer saying, yeah, this person was an independent contractor. They were not my employee. Therefore, you don't have jurisdiction. Sorry, NERC. Okay, but what we will do is we'll also look into that type of relationship. It's great that it's an independent contractor relationship. It's great that you have that. Howsoever, do you control this person's breaks? Do they have to report to you? Do you supply their tools or equipment? We will actually look into the nature of the relationship to ensure that it is, in fact, an independent contractor relationship where this person is their own boss and working for you as a vendor or a contractor. If it's not, and we see evidence that it's actually a masked employer-employee relationship, we will take the charge. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're done with employment discrimination in the sense that that's one area of jurisdiction that we will look into complaints of discrimination. Remember, based on those protected categories, race, age, color, religion, gender identity or expression of that identity, sexual harassment, age, genetic information. Okay, so that's an employment. Now we have another pocket of jurisdiction which deals with access to equal enjoyment in public spaces. And this is the state public accommodation discrimination laws. This is in our NRSs. This is not tied to any federal laws like employment. This is state. So we say here at NERC, this is state only. This is a state only case. And so there is no protection for age. So someone, may try to go to a park and, people run them off because of their age. I don't even know a hypothetical for that, but we wouldn't have jurisdiction over that. And there's no protection for genetic information discrimination in a public place. Again, don't have a hypo for that. We don't get those. But we do get our access to bathrooms based on gender identity. Okay, so that would be a great example of how you might have a public restroom and a person who is transgender, one of our Nevadan folks wanting to use the bathroom of their gender identity, not their biological sex, which they can do, which they may do and are allowed to do, but maybe being denied the opportunity to use that restroom. Okay, so next slide, Leela. Okay, so I'm just going to read off what other places of public accommodation may look like. Again, the key here being equal enjoyment, meaning that no matter who you are in public spaces, we should equally enjoy them. Sometimes, again, I'll pivot. We get questions in our training and they're really honest back to the bathroom situation where folks are like, well, what about my rights of having the bathroom just be for women only? And what Leela and I have to say respectfully is that, you can use the bathroom of your choice. No one is telling you you can't. So you're not being denied equal enjoyment. It's actually the folks that are told they can't use the bathroom there. And there's some cases that we mention in our training that we talk about to kind of give an example. And, Leela and I really love this dialogue that we can have with folks so they can really understand what the law is, how to apply it so that they can be, up on it. Okay, so let me just read what are places of public accommodation. So they include any establishment, and this is the slide, I'm going to read it for you. It includes any establishment or place to which the public is invited or which is intended for public use, such as schools. We have jurisdiction over schools, hotels, restaurants, retail stores, doctors' offices, parks, and educational institutions. It doesn't include any private club or any other establishment not open to the public. So when you think about public spaces, think about Vegas in the 40s and 50s, where the African-American entertainment had to only access the kitchen and couldn't enjoy the casino. Think about the Walgreens lunch counters in the South during the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. Equal enjoyment, water fountain use, being able to access public transportation. I know everybody Ubers now, but buses were a big deal, if you recall. And so this is that law, okay? We actually had a case that it was confidential, but it actually litigated, so I can speak on it. In Las Vegas, it was Leela's case, and she's amazing. And we found cause. There were 2 young boys in a school who were regarded as gay. Don't know if they were or not, didn't matter. But they were regarded as gay, and they were bullied and harassed based on that designation by others, stabbed with pencils in the genitals, called names, teachers weren't backing the kids, parents pulled the kids out of school, they filed a complaint with NERC. The complaint said that because and they were separate complaints, but they were, companion cases, if you will. Because my child cannot enjoy equal access to school because they're bullied so much based on their perception of being gay, they're being denied equal enjoyment of learning. They can't learn. So we're filing a charge of discrimination. And we tried to settle it out. We didn't. It actually went to litigation. And one of the things that, and these young boys were successful where their parents were, because the parents went on their behalf because they were minors. One of the things that they'd asked was, as damages, was that you're going to pay for private school. My kids still have to learn. So we try to avoid that in the state, but it's really important that we give these examples to folks when we train so that they know what the law is and that when we talk about public places, we're also talking about schools too. Okay, Leela, next slide. So just kind of rehash this. What's public accommodation discrimination? It's refusal to serve. I won't serve you because you're African American. I'll use that example because I am. You can't get in because of this. Unequal employment, refusal to permit service animals or service animal in training. So that could be you wanting to, with a disability, wanting to go to a diner to enjoy pancakes for breakfast or your coffee, but you have your service animal or service animal in training and they don't let you come in. Well, how the law sees it is that that animal is an extension of you because they are assisting you in your disability. Now, I'm not talking about emotional support animals. That's totally different. I'm talking about a service animal. Okay. Yeah. So that's the form of public accommodation discrimination. You can't enjoy a restaurant because the extension of you, aka your service animal, is not allowed in. And then the last bullet, we talked about this: refusal to allow individuals use of a bathroom or other gender-specific facilities that coincides with his or her or they gender identity or expression. All right, next slide, Leela. Okay, so here's some exemptions for public accommodation discrimination. And, Leela and I and Sophia have an interesting scenario that we will share. So sometimes you can discriminate based on a protected category in public places. I'll go to the second bullet. That would include perhaps going to a bar where ladies get in free. Okay, so there is a business necessity, or not even a necessity, but a business reason unrelated to discrimination based on gender. It's more economically motivated to discriminate. And so differential pricing is included in that. So when you see businesses that have, okay, ladies get in free before 10, and we've had folks file against that, upset about that, and they've lost. They've lost with NERC and they've lost in court. That it's not discrimination based on any animus towards the gender. It's based on economic motives. Okay, so that, well, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so when we talk about filing with NERC based on public accommodation discrimination, again, don't stew on this for more than a year because you'll get time barred out. You have 300 days from enjoying equal access to file with NERC. Okay, the business has to be a Nevada business, and the harm had to have occurred here. Okay. Next slide. So we talked about employment discrimination in the federal laws that protect employees. We just talked about public accommodation and equal enjoyment in the state. Now we're going to talk about housing. Okay, and housing's huge. Housing is a big deal. In light of COVID-19, you never knew how much you really needed a home until you experienced a pandemic and had to be quarantined at a home. And so state housing laws protect Nevadans against discrimination in housing. As I mentioned, the federal Department of Housing and Urban Development also do that. A lot of our constituents file with HUD because they get more services than the NERC can provide at the moment, but this is still the law. We still have jurisdiction and we do take these cases. So under NRS 118, there is no protection for age in housing. There's no protection for genetic information in housing. There is added protection for family status. Okay, and then it's public policy to make sure that folks can own a home here, try to get a home, rent a place, and not be refused based on race, color, gender. Next slide, Leela. So that leads right into my next slide beautifully. What's housing discrimination? Well, it's refusal to sell or rent because someone is something. Fill in the blank. Okay, one of those protected categories, except again, genetic information and the things that we just talked about being exemptions. It's refusal to permit an emotional support animal, service animal, or service animal in training in housing. So you might have someone who needs a dog or service animal or even an emotional support animal in their apartment, but the landlord is not having it. So we get complaints like that too. It's also a refusal to allow reasonable modifications to a dwelling. This is, tying in with the Americans with Disabilities Act. You need a ramp built. The law says you can build it, but it's at your cost. And if you are renting the place or selling it, you might have to remove it at your cost. but you should be able to enjoy and access your home, not because you have a disability or because you are denied, a mortgage or financing for a home. The housing cases are amazing. I've really dug deep into reading about them, especially since America's dying to get in a relationship with HUD about ways that landlords and homeowners and developers would really try to keep people from buying in their community because they were really worried about property values dropping. That's a whole nother training we can do another day, but folks in Nevada should enjoy living where they want to live, not based on anything other than their ability to pay their mortgage or their rent, okay? So the type of housing charges, we'll go to the next slide. When you want to file a complaint with us, it's rare. They mostly go to HUD in San Francisco, but when they do file with NERC, again, you have a year to file with us. Interestingly enough, most housing cases are more immediate, like the eviction notice is on the door. And so, those have to be processed a lot more quickly. But you still have a year. You still have a year. The landlord or entity has to own more than 3 single-family homes. So if you are renting from a friend, they have one side of the house, you have the other, or you are renting from someone who has less than 3 family homes, they're not covered. They're not bound to housing laws. It's almost like how you have to have an employment at least 15 employees to be brought into pre-litigation for this. Same here with landowners. You have to have at least 3 properties that you're managing, and you have to be renting from one of them, or else it's just, you don't have jurisdiction over it. And you're left to, I guess, go to court on your own. Homeowners Association and property management companies are included in that. In fact, we see a lot of, issues with modifications and HOAs. And we do, work with real estate division on that, and we'll refer folks back and forth. But yes, your HOA should allow you to make modifications, even if it doesn't go with your CC&Rs per se. However, again, you might have to bear the cost of implementing and removing. Okay, so that's our 3 areas: employment, public places, and housing. And so now we're going to talk about the complaint process. Leela, can we go to the next slide? Perfect. Okay, Leela, you can just put them all in. I'm going to walk them through this because then we'll go to questions. Okay, so folks ask, okay, I feel like I've been discriminated against. How do I get started? What do I do? And so we have a complaint process. And so we have a website right now because of COVID. We have a skeleton crew, me, admin, Leela's here, everybody's remoting and everybody's safe. However, you can access us through going online and filing a complaint. And so that's how it starts. File a complaint. Usually it starts with a phone call. I mean, they like the fact that we still have live people to talk to. Our admin staff, they're amazing. And so they will basically talk through some of the things that I've mentioned to constituents, our Nevadans, about, should they maybe file here, or maybe they have a labor issue, they need to call the labor commissioner. Maybe it's a prevailing wage issue. It's not discrimination based on a protected category, or sorry, this is over 300 days. We can refer you to the Nevada State Bar, legal aid, for other resources. We just can't help you. But starts with a phone call, and then in that phone call, we say, okay, you need to file a complaint and get it into our office. And so you file a complaint. At that point, you're just a complainant, in the sense that you are a Nevadan who's concerned about an allegation of discrimination. We cannot verify it yet. We do not have what's called legal probable cause. So right now it's just a complaint. And so when you file a complaint with us, it gets assigned to one of our investigators to review it with you in a live intake interview. The intake interview is a bit time consuming because folks like to really talk about what they're going through. We have to really narrow the scope. They can go up to 90 minutes, depending on how egregious, And I will say this, we had our investigators, we have them trained every year. It's almost like continuing legal ed, but it's continuing investigator ed, especially with the governor's interest on making sure and ensuring a sexual harassment-free workplace. We had to get them trained on trauma and how to have conversations with folks who might have experienced trauma, because they may not answer questions in a way that you think they're credible. So we have trauma-informed training. We do it here at NERC for victims of sexual harassment or any kind of trauma, because if you think about discrimination based on race, or you were sexually harassed, or you had a disability and you were fired and now you're really concerned, or like our last presenter, you have PTSD, you're a veteran, you've served this country, but you can't get a job, or you had a job and you were treated differently, you couldn't get an accommodation, you're going to have some trauma. And so our investigators need to be really sensitive to that and not make judgments based on how people are responding, especially now that it's over the phone. Okay, we really have to take that in. So we have intake interviews. We basically establish what's called prima facie evidence that, yeah, we think there's something here. We don't know yet, but yeah, there's something here. Or, yeah, no, this is not our jurisdiction. This is not discrimination. I'm sorry, it's dismissal. But if you proceed past the intake, it then gets stamped as a charge. Now, the intakes, to ensure due process, are reviewed by our chief. Okay, they're reviewed by management. It's either Leela, me, or Sophia. We're all looking at things, or our interns from Boyd. We really are blessed to have young lawyers wanting to get in on equal rights, and we partner with Boyd, and sometimes they help us out with cases, and we just have a lot of eyes looking at it because we don't want to miss an opportunity to correct wrongful discrimination or train against it. So once a case becomes a charge, it gets, assuming this is an employment case, it gets a NERC number and an EEOC number. That's that work share agreement. Once it gets both numbers, we've now alerted EEOC through our shared system with EEOC, they run it, that we've got this. We've got a Nevada claimant, they're saying workplace discrimination, let's say it's sexual harassment, we're on it. Please step back. It also alerts EEOC in the event this person decides they want to file also with EEOC. EEOC can look them up in the system and say, okay, you're with NERC right now, just hang tight. Let's see how your process goes, okay? So once that case becomes a charge, before we investigate, we offer another opportunity for due process to settle without the state doing a full-on investigation. We like this because we get a lot of cases and we're a small but mighty group, but to the extent that we can have the employer and the employee work out, excuse me. Sorry, everybody. To the extent that we can have them work it out, we'll facilitate a mediation. If it settles, great. Excuse me. If it doesn't, we go into full investigation mode. I'm so sorry. Some dust hit my throat. Talking too much. I promise I'm almost done. So if we can't get a successful mediation, we'll enroll it into an investigation where it gets filed and assigned to the next available investigator. If we are able to find through the investigation that there is probable cause evidence of discrimination, we will attempt again to settle, this time with the strength of the investigation behind it, and also legal review from the AG's office through Sophia's team and some of our Boyd interns and myself. And at conciliation, we are pretty successful with those and the mediation. Last year alone, we settled over $2.2 million in cases at no cost to Nevadans who needed settlement for actual cases. Through conciliation, we're able to show the employer, here's the evidence. We keep all witnesses confidential, but might you need some training? So we're able to also insert training so that the employers don't feel like we're just attacking them. Because usually the folks that we get online for the conciliations are the CEOs, the higher ups, HR and legal, and it's usually a lower level manager that was the bad actor that presented the noose in the office that made someone feel uncomfortable. That's a true story. That gave preferential customer service to a non-person of color pit dealer. That's true. That's true. We've seen that before too. So it's usually not the people we have conciliating that are responsible for it, but they have a duty to their organization to train down because they're liable, they're vicariously liable. So when we have a conciliation and we settle, it settles quietly. We tell EEOC the case is closed, it goes to archives. It's a confidential settlement agreement. No one's aware of it other than the parties that we bring together in settlement. And we take no fee for that. Now on the far left side of the slide, if we do an investigation and we just can't get the evidence, and sometimes it's just we couldn't get the evidence. We might believe that it happened, but we have to base it on evidence. We have no probable cause. We let the charging party know that, sorry, just the evidence was not enough to substantiate a claim of discrimination under state law. Here are your other options. You may litigate on your own. So we don't just leave the parties out on alerts. We do kind of give them next steps. We also notify EEOC that we've closed and settled the case. They still have another avenue. They can appeal it to me. And so, you know, even though we dismiss it, they can still say, hey, I have additional evidence here. Something I could have provided to you at the beginning, I have now. We'll reopen the case. We'll reopen the case. We will try to leave no stone unturned to see if we can find evidence to substantiate discrimination, because we don't want it. If we still can't get there, we will close it and then tell parties that your next avenue, although NERC couldn't find the evidence, is you may need to lawyer up, have your own discovery, and take your own case to court. In the rare occasion that we have egregious acts and we can't get folks together on a conciliation, we will have a public hearing. And the charging party has to agree to it because it's public. All this complaint process is totally confidential. But if it's so egregious and it offends a conscience of NERC or the commissioners, the 5 appointed, they serve as a tribunal and I bring it publicly. And Sophia prosecutes. So then the state then takes a very aggressive position to say this type of behavior is not, it's not in statute, it's not enforceable, it violates equal protection laws in the state and it needs to stop. And we've had 2 in the last several years. You know, our DAG is that good where at the 11th hour, we get them to settle because they just, they don't want the heat publicly. So, you know, so far, so good. That is our process. I'm sorry about, you know, me choking just 5 minutes ago. But now we'll open it up to any questions. I want to thank you, Chair Flores. It's great to see you again, members of the committee and new members of the committee or new assembly members. Hey, great to meet you. We're here at your disposal. We're here if you need us. And now we'll entertain any questions at this time. Thanks so much.
And thank you for your presentation, all the work you do. You're stretched thin often, so thank you for your work. We'll start off with our Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much, Ms. Jenkins, for your presentation. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate the good work that NERC does to ensure that every individual in the state of Nevada has equal rights, and those rights are protected. So I really do appreciate that and all the work your office is doing. The first question I have is regarding the work share agreement that you talked about a little bit earlier today. Can you talk about the issue with employers claiming that the state law charges have not been exhausted while only filing with the EEOC? Because I've heard a number of complaints about that issue.
Chair Flores, may I speak directly to Madam Vice Chair?
Yes, please go direct. Thank you.
Thank you. It's hard when I say through you too, and then have to remember the question. So I really appreciate your grace in that. So Kara Jenkins for the record, work share agreements. Okay, so our relationship with the EEOC is one that is a mutual relationship. And so the work share agreement is an agreement. It's basically essentially a contract that says we agree to close X amount of cases of employment discrimination in Nevada for a federal fiscal year. They're on the federal fiscal year, the federal fiscal year calendar. And so we do that every year. Their federal fiscal year starts, I think, September 1st and ends October, or I might have that mixed up. It's right around October 1st, it starts and ends September 30th, whereas we're summer months. So we get those cases to them in their time. And as far as any employer saying that going to NERC does not exhaust any administrative remedies, that's not truly accurate. Because we work share with them, it's a dual filing system. So if they go to us, it's essentially the same as going to EEOC. Unless, you know, sometimes we transfer to EEOC because maybe there's a perceived conflict. We don't want folks to think that, you know, we're in any way in conflict of interest, or maybe it's an Equal Pay Act case because they have a tight statute of limitations and we need to get them, you know, relief sooner than possible. But no, you file with one, it's like filing with the other. And thank you for that, because maybe we need to add that in our slides. when we train.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to have that clarification because I know that there has been some misunderstanding, I think mostly from employees, I'm sure, that just, and that, filing with NERC or filing with EEOC is acceptable in that type of case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Assemblywoman Duran, please.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your presentation. It's always good to refresh your rights, to know them. My question is concerning the COVID and the vaccine, because I know I am a representative for members in the hotel industry that have this. So you basically stated, and I know it's probably protected under the ADA accommodation and stuff now. How are we going to handle that if it is mandated or mandatory to have the vaccine? How do we advise people to follow through if the company is mandating that you have a vaccine shot or something to be able to work there? Is my question, if you know.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. That's the one that we've been asking since COVID hit. And so directly to you, Assemblywoman Duran, as far as we know, there is no requirement that, or an employer at this point in time cannot force an individual to take a vaccine. There's a couple reasons for that. You could have a pre-existing condition that conflicts with the vaccine and it makes you worse off than the vaccine is supposed to help you. You may have a religious reason for not taking a vaccine. So right now, we are giving guidance that an employer may strongly encourage the use of a vaccine, especially if they come into contact with members of the public and they don't see it interfering with any pre-existing conditions they may have. So we're working with the local office on getting guidance right now, but we will blast that information out. We'll make it available to folks. We'll even post it on our website. We do tend to do that. But right now, there is no requirement that you have to take a vaccine in order to work. However, if you don't take a vaccine and you do get sick, is it a workers' comp issue? We don't know. So there's a lot of questions there. So it's like, how do you mitigate your own risk for getting sick? And what is your responsibility in ensuring that you aren't a carrier or that you don't make others around you sick because you don't want to take the vaccine? I know that we're still going to, and the CDC is recommending it, so that's where we're taking our guidance. We're still going to say that you should definitely wash hands, maintain social distance, wear masks, and exercise good hygiene, which is just good to have, in any space that you're sharing with folks. But some of the issues that we're thinking about, and we're going to be partnering with EEOC on, is if you decide not to take the vaccine and you don't have a religious accommodation, you don't have an ADA accommodation for it, but you do get sick, is the employer responsible, especially when it's available to you? If it's not available to you, right now it's really hard to get it, but when it is available to you and you're just not wanting to take the vaccine because you just don't want to, is that an undue hardship for the employer? We look at the employer's perspective. Now we have someone that could be a carrier or exposing my other staff to potential virus. It's a lot of questions. So we'll dig deep and we'll try to get them answered for you. And I'll also make a point to have my team circle back with your office to get you that training. We're happy to do it. But right now, all we know is from our guidance with EEOC is that you cannot require someone to take a vaccine. You can strongly encourage it.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just a follow-up. So
Please.
With that being said, is it training for the employers to also, as well as to let them know that there is an issue, or is it, because you said you were training with the employers on some ADA accommodations?
Yes.
So we're going to possibly get this information, and it's not discriminatory if they bring forward for HIPAA laws and stuff like that, if they allow to basically say I have a medical reason or religious, they're going to have to prove that, correct?
Thank you. Directly to you, Chairperson. This is Kara Jenkins for the record. Yes, all this is private And so it would be a conversation that the employee would have with human resources on why they would need an accommodation. And all of that is confidential because, as you mentioned, HIPAA, medical conditions are not something that, are broadcast at the workplace. And as far as accommodation, yeah, we did do a training on COVID and the workplace because we noticed that when you're looking at the pre-existing conditions that are listed by the CDC, and then some of the conditions that are substantially life-limiting under the ADA, they merge. So we did a Venn diagram to show where they merge. So for example, if you have cancer, if you have HIV, if you have diabetes, you're at a greater risk for having not for contracting COVID, but for having a stronger reaction to it, to a COVID infection. It's just harder for you to overcome. Asthma is considered, pre-existing condition for COVID, for a stronger COVID reaction if exposed, as well as it's covered under the ADA. What's not covered? Obesity. Who knew obesity could be a pre-existing condition for COVID, but it's not covered under the ADA. So there are some things that we wanted to make sure in our training that employers were aware of what to do, because NERC had to do it in real time. It's really hard being the state's trainer and going through last March when we were like, oh man, what do we do? We wanted to really make sure that we were up on it. So the EEOC has some really awesome pandemic guidance that they had posted, and we went right there. And then we basically took that guidance through their FAQs and then turned it into slides. And we also trained with some other law groups on kind of how we should give guidance to employers. We did it internally for Dieter. And then we had a huge training that we did virtually to just say, I know this is crazy. We're in real time with this. There's a pandemic going on. Everybody has to be socially distant. Can you accommodate these people? Are you equipped for remote work? If you have to be in person, what are the guidelines? How do you enforce it? Some people were not really buying the whole mask thing. That got to be tricky. Then there were these fake cards. The DOJ had to put out guidance. There were these fake cards that said wearing a mask violates my rights under the ADA. That was false. So we had to put some information that, hey, go to the DOJ's website. There is no such thing as a card that says wearing a mask violates your ADA. So there was so much going on in real time in terms of also keeping my team safe. I don't know how we did it, but God is good. So, and I'm not supposed to get religious on this, but we made it through. NERC is very resilient and we got through. But yeah, we will get that guidance to any of the members who want it. The COVID one and then the vaccine one is coming. And I know that Dieter wants us to get that out by March. So we'll be working for that. And so we can circle back. Yeah, sure, no problem.
And I would appreciate a copy of that once it comes through and to be able to distribute it to my colleagues or to my union as well. I think it's great information. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, I don't know if we have any additional questions. I apologize if I missed somebody in the chat, but I don't see anybody else. But if you want to unmute yourself and just announce yourself if you do have a question.
Another question, if I may.
Is this Vice Chair?
Yes, this is Vice Chair Torres. I apologize.
Madam Vice Chair, please.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you once again. So I just have a follow-up to the question from earlier, but I kind of needed a moment to wrap my head around the concept and the response. And so I'm just wondering if there would be any issue with the right to sue notice if the complaint is filed with the EEOC, or what that would look like.
Madam Vice Chair, directly to you, Kara Jenkins for the record. Right to sue, that's a great question. So there are, the state can give a right to sue. So when we've exhausted all of our attempts to settle this complaint and folks want to go to court, NERC can give the right to sue to parties. If it's an employment case, they'll get a NERC right to sue, and EEOC will more likely than not, once they do a substantial weight review of our investigation, they'll give a right to sue as well. With the EEOC's right to sue, you have 90 days from the date of that letter, that right to sue letter, to get your case in federal court or it's bumped. With us, we have a little bit more time. We're told a little bit longer. So I believe it's like 180 days. Leela, is that right on our state right to sue? Can you weigh in and introduce yourself for the record?
Hi, this is Leela Vizcarra, Chief Compliance Investigator and Outreach Specialist for the record. with our right to sue, state right to sue, charging parties also have 90 days to file in court.
Okay, so it's not 180, it's 90.
90. 90, correct.
Thanks, Leila. That's why I need her.
And Madam Vice Chair, I don't know if you had any follow-up questions.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do have a couple other questions, but we can continue this conversation offline as well, because I'm very interested in the work that you're doing. And I know obviously that your office is doing all that you can to protect our civil rights. And I just make sure that our policy and our statutes doing the same.
Thank you so much.
All right, and members, I don't know that we have any other questions. I don't see them. But if you do, please feel free to unmute yourself and announce yourself. Seeing none, Ms. Jenkins, thank you for the presentation and thank you for the work you're doing. It's always a pleasure to have you in this committee. And members, as always, I encourage you to reach out, and they have an abundance of information they could always share and work with you on. With that, we're going to go ahead and close out the presentation of the Nevada Equal Rights Commission. And I'd like to open it up for those wishing to speak in public comment. Broadcasting, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 300. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
For the record, my name is Tony Yarbrough, Y-A-R-B-R-O-U-G-H. I represent nearly 9,000 members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars in the Department of Nevada. I also represent close to 500,000 members of the United Veterans Legislative Council as the current secretary. The UVLC is an organization of all veterans organizations throughout the state of Nevada. That includes all veterans, active duty military, National Guard, families and advocates, and those that have been on this call as well. I'm sure that many of you have veterans in your family history and have direct experience of active duty military service. As we move forward, please remember them, family sacrifices, the commitment to serve our country, and how proudly you support them. All we want to do is the best for them. Chairman Flores, I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you once again. We've accomplished an awful lot in years past, and I know we're going to continue doing so. I just want to say on behalf of the NDVS presentation that the NDVS is actually a foundation bedrock, if you will, of all veterans activities that take place in the state of Nevada. Works with all organizations and works very well with us. We partner directly with them, and we certainly appreciate the leadership of Colonel Miller. And one of the things that I would like to do as well is follow up with a email to the committee manager to explain who the UVLC is, so that in our future endeavors, you'll know who we are and what we stand for. With that, I appreciate your time. God bless you.
Likewise, sir. Thank you for your commitment to our veteran community. And I know in the past we've had the pleasure of working alongside of you, and we intend to continue to do the same. The next caller, please.
Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you for that. We have nothing else on the agenda, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up for next week. I had looked at the possibility of maybe on Monday, starting either very late and or giving us the opportunity for those of you that are flying back home that maybe we cancel the hearing, but we do have both our Secretary of State and Treasurer coming before this committee. And so unfortunately, I know that I was trying to make that happen, but we need to sit down with them and have an opportunity to work together. So the intent is for us to have that meeting on Monday at 9 a.m. And then we're going to start having some bill hearings starting next week. Nothing too heavy. And we'll start off with some of our agencies coming before us and bringing forth some bills that I don't believe are too controversial. And then we'll start moving into other stuff as the month moves forward. But I just wanted to give you a heads up of what we intend to do. And I hope that you all enjoyed this first week. We have a few hiccups here and there, but that's normal. We expected that. I appreciate everybody's attentiveness and working hard. I appreciate the well thought out questions. I can tell that we're all in the same wavelength of just trying to do what's best for our state. I'd like to adjourn today's meeting in honor of just all those amazing women and men who have stepped up and carry that badge of veteran now. We know that this country would not be what it is without those sacrifices. So with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting in their honor. This meeting's adjourned.